Good evening, Pastor Matthew Hollywood, United Methodist Church. Today is Friday the 22nd. We are getting really close to Christmas Eve, which means, of course, our journey through the Gospel according to St. Luke is also coming to a close in just a couple of days. We'll probably get two up tomorrow, and then, of course, one on Christmas Eve, or maybe one tomorrow and two on Christmas Eve. We shall see. It's something that I think every year I forget how important, but also how weird it is to have Christmas just around the bend, and yet we are drawing close to the cross, which Christmas, of course, we celebrate the beginning of Jesus' life, but here we are drawing near to the end. So let us see what Jesus has to say. Remember, we left him. He's in Jerusalem. We haven't had Last Supper yet. We haven't had anything like that. He's still teaching right up until the end. Jesus looked up and saw rich people putting their gifts into the treasury. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. He said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in all she had to live on." When some were speaking about the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, he said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down." They asked him, "Teacher, when will this be? And what will be the sign that this is about to take place?" And he said, "Beware that you are not led astray. For many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and 'the time is near.' Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes in various places, famines and plagues, and there will be dreadful portents and great signs from heaven. But before all this occurs, they will arrest you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you'll be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance, for I will give you words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. You'll be betrayed even by parents and siblings, by relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You'll be hated by all because of my name, but not a hair on your head will perish. By your endurance, you will gain your souls. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains, and those inside the city must leave it, and those out in the country must not enter it. For these are days of vengeance, as the fulfillment of all that is written. Woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing infants in those days, for there will be great distress on the earth and wrath against this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be taken away as captives among all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled on by nations until the times of the nations are fulfilled. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth distress among nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming into the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud, with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to take place, stand up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near." Then he told them a parable. "Look at the fig tree and all the leaves. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is already near. So also when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Be on guard so that your hearts are not weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day does not catch you unexpectedly like a trap. For it will come upon all who live on the face of the whole earth. Be alert at all times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that will take place and to stand before the Son of Man." Every day he was teaching in the temple, and at night he would go out and spend the night on the Mount of Olives, as it was called. and all the people would get up early in the morning to listen to him in the temple. This is the word of God for us and for many, the people of God. Thanks be to God. It's a little deja vu here. In our lectionary cycle that we follow for the most part at Hollywood, there are texts prescribed for each Sunday. Advent always starts with stories like this. So if you go back 3 Sundays, we're in the Gospel of Matthew, but very similar story about this end times, these signs of what is to come, and the call to be ready. And so it's interesting because we know that Advent, which we are still in, is about the waiting for Christ. Yes, we remember how the people waited for the Messiah before the birth of Jesus, but we also wait for the return. We are still the people waiting for the return of Christ, the return of the Messiah. And it kind of draws into comparison, or puts into perspective the permanence and the temporary of all things. Like, we get this idea of like nations will lift up sword against nations, kingdom will fight kingdoms, there will be natural disasters, people, like, we have this way of reading this like, oh, he's talking like when this comes, we have like a checklist of end time stuff. And I know people do it. I remember during COVID, people were saying this is it. I remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, people were saying, there are some people, and unfortunately some Christians, who feel the same way about what's going on in Israel right now, because this means Jesus is closer. That's not really what is coming to me, and it never really has. Jesus says very clearly, there will be people telling you the time is near, and I am Jesus, and you need to you need to ignore them, be suspicious of those sort of claims. It's a massive claim to make, and in our world today, there's a lot of money to be made in those sort of claims. But when wasn't there a time when nation lifted up sword against nation and kingdoms tottered? When wasn't there time when natural disasters came? That's always been the case. It's always happened, maybe in different places here and there, and maybe there are places that we're like, I don't really care if a war breaks out there, but other ones we do. And I want to get into that, but it's kind of this question that all of this stuff can be going on around us, and it can distract us. And I don't mean that we shouldn't pay any mind to it, but it can make us afraid, it can make us anxious, it can make us act in ways that belie our identity as a follower of Christ. And so it's not as if Jesus is saying, hey, when all this stuff happens, just ignore it. No, I think there's a sense of like, be my followers in those moments too. Yes, there's a lot going on in their journey. They're dealing with a lot of like verbal barbs and everything, but things are going pretty well. But Jesus knows things aren't always going to go well, because things haven't always gone well since the fall. But if our faith is a faith that is only good when everything is good, then we have to wonder what's going on there. And Jesus is just like, look, things are decent right now. But Jesus is like, I know where I'm going, and I've been telling y'all where I'm going, what's going to happen to me. But things are going to be bad until the perfect kingdom. And if we're always waiting for the next shoe to drop, and it will, to be scared and afraid and run around and fear-mongering and all that sort of stuff, we're going to miss a lot of the discipleship. We're going to miss a lot of what it means to be a follower of Christ. Even, here we are, we're just a few days away from Christmas, the birth of Christ, and we kind of know, in Matthew's gospel, it talks about, we call about the slaughtering of the innocents, Herod's order to kill all the baby boys because he's terrified of this Messiah. Like, no sooner has the Messiah entered the fray, even though he is vulnerable and completely baby, the nations strike. The nations do what nations do. Broken people do what broken people do. Um, so yeah, that's something interesting to think about. Um, yeah, there's a lot there to digest. So I'd love to hear, what's going on, what you're thinking about, and just a reminder: we are just a couple of days away from Christmas Eve. So a reminder at Hollywood, we will be having our normal, typical Sunday morning service at 10 o'clock because we got to light that fourth Advent candle, and then in the afternoon and evening we will celebrate Christmas Eve. 4 o'clock we have our family service, the ABCs of Christmas. I mean, I don't want to, speak ill or cast aspersions. I don't want to try to rank them, but man, I'm excited for this family service. Whether you've got family, kids, grandkids, whatever coming up, but even if you don't, it's going to be so much fun. I'm really excited for what we're going to do. But then, if you're looking for a normal, typical Christmas Eve service, 7 o'clock, and if you're looking for something a little more contemplative and quiet, maybe, and just a little more contemplative, come out and join us at 11 o'clock. So I will see y'all tomorrow with the next chapter as we move on, and we'll be watching Jesus, reading Jesus, going to the cross, to the tomb, and then away from the tomb. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Have a good night, y'all.